I stood at the window of my penthouse office, watching the sunset paint the city's skyline in shades of gold. Below me, Chicago's financial district hummed with end-of-day activity, but my mind was fixed on tomorrow's meeting, a real estate closing that would change everything. My name is Sophia Mitchell, though my family hasn't used that name in nearly a decade. To them, I'm just the disappointment, the daughter who wasn't worth their time or investment. But tomorrow, they'll learn that I'm also the anonymous owner of Mitchell Real Estate Holdings, the company they're desperately trying to buy their dream house from. Ms. Mitchell, my assistant Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. The final paperwork for tomorrow's closing just arrived, and your sister posted another photo of the house on Instagram. I turned from the window, accepting the folder Sarah held out. Let me guess, another post about their perfect future home. Sarah nodded, pulling up the post on her tablet. There it was, a sweeping shot of the Georgian mansion I purchased 3 years ago, accompanied by my sister Diana's gushing caption, "One more day until this beauty is ours. Mom and Dad's dream house. They deserve this after all their hard work. #bless #$1,000,000 listing #DreamMom." The irony wasn't lost on me. The house they thought they were buying tomorrow had been mine for years. I purchased it specifically because I knew it was exactly what they'd always wanted, the sprawling mansion in Lake Forest, with its manicured gardens and lake views, the perfect showcase for their supposed success. They still have no idea you own it? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. She'd been with me since the beginning, watching my plan unfold with patient understanding. No, I replied, settling behind my desk. They still think Mitchell Real Estate Holdings is owned by some mysterious businessman they've never met. Just like they think their daughter is probably still struggling to make ends meet somewhere. The truth was far different from what they imagined. After they cut me off 10 years ago, I hadn't crumbled as they'd expected. Instead, I built something they couldn't even dream of, a real estate empire that now controlled some of the most valuable properties in Chicago. The memory of that final night in their house still burned clear in my mind. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree they'd barely acknowledge. Diana, my younger sister by 2 years, had just dropped out of her 3rd attempt at college, but somehow that was different. She was finding herself. I was just a disappointment. We need to focus our resources on Diana right now, my father had announced over dinner. She needs our support to figure out her path. You understand, don't you, Sophia? You're the responsible one after all. Those words, the responsible one, had always been their excuse to ignore me. Being responsible meant I didn't need attention, didn't need support, didn't need anything. Diana was the fragile one, the special one, the one who needed everything. We're cutting off your trust fund, my mother added, not even looking up from her plate. Diana needs that money for her fresh start. You have a job, you'll be fine. My job at the time was an entry-level position at a small real estate firm. The pay was barely enough to cover a shared apartment in a decent neighborhood. My trust fund had been my safety net, my chance to build something of my own. You're taking my trust fund, my inheritance from Grandpa, and giving it to Diana. I remember how steady my voice had been, even as my world crumbled. The money he specifically left for me? My father's face hardened. Your grandfather didn't understand family dynamics. Diana needs this more than you do. If you can't support what's best for this family, maybe you should leave. So I did. I packed my bags that night and walked out of their sprawling suburban home, ignoring my mother's dramatic sighs and Diana's smug smile. They expected me to come crawling back within months, begging for help and admitting they were right. Instead, I threw myself into work. My entry-level job became my education in real estate. I learned everything I could: property values, market trends, investment strategies. I worked overtime, took on extra projects, made myself indispensable to my bosses. But the real turning point came 6 months after I left home. A small envelope arrived at my tiny apartment containing a key and a letter. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. Dear Ms. Mitchell, the letter began. Per the instructions of your late grandfather, Harold Mitchell, this letter and its contents are to be delivered to you 6 months after any attempt by your parents to divert or withdraw the trust fund he established for you. My hands shook as I read on. Grandpa Harold, it seemed, had known my parents better than they'd known themselves. He'd set up a second, secret trust for me, one they'd never known about. The key belonged to a safety deposit box containing documents for offshore accounts, property deeds, and investment portfolios worth far more than the trust fund my parents had taken. Your parents, the letter continued in my grandfather's familiar handwriting, never understood the value of building something for yourself. They coast on inherited wealth and social status, teaching your sister the same habits. But I've watched you, Sophia. You have the same drive I had, the same understanding that true success comes from creating, not just spending. This is your chance to build something remarkable. Don't waste it trying to win their approval. It's not worth having. That night, I sat on my shabby couch until sunrise, formulating a plan. With the resources my grandfather had left me, I could do more than just survive. I could create something extraordinary. But I would do it quietly, secretly, building an empire in silence while my family continued to dismiss me. I started small, using a portion of the funds to buy distressed properties, renovate them, and sell for profit. Each success led to a larger opportunity. I hired Sarah as my assistant, then started adding more staff as my company grew. I created Mitchell Real Estate Holdings under layers of corporate anonymity, ensuring my name would never appear in public records. Within 5 years, my company owned prime real estate throughout Chicago. High-rises, luxury condos, commercial properties, all generating massive profits that I reinvested into further expansion. I moved from my shabby apartment to a sleek penthouse, though I kept this hidden from my family during our increasingly rare interactions. They didn't want to see my success, so they didn't. At holiday gatherings, they barely asked about my life, preferring to focus on Diana's latest adventures. She tried being a yoga instructor, a social media influencer, a life coach, each venture funded by my parents, each one failing within months. Still in real estate, my mother would ask dismissively, as if I were selling timeshares instead of building an empire. Well, I suppose it's stable work. Diana's starting a wellness consulting business. Isn't that exciting? I'd smile and nod, never mentioning that I just closed a $100 million deal or that my company was now one of the largest property owners in the city. Let them think I was struggling. Let them believe their decision to cut me off had kept me down. 3 years ago, I learned through business channels that my parents had started looking for their dream house. They'd always talked about it, a historic mansion in Lake Forest, overlooking Lake Michigan. It had to be Georgian style, had to have at least 8 bedrooms, had to have formal gardens and a circular driveway. When the perfect property came on the market, I bought it immediately through one of my shell companies. I knew they weren't ready to buy yet. They were still funding Diana's failed ventures, but I could wait. I kept the house maintained, empty, perfect, knowing they would eventually come looking. And now, after 3 years, they finally had the money. They'd spent the past month bragging to everyone about their perfect find, never questioning why such an immaculate property had been sitting empty, waiting for them. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., they would arrive at my office, though they didn't know it was mine, ready to sign the papers and claim their dream home. They'd spent weeks dealing with my company through intermediaries, never once suspecting that the mysterious owner they were buying from was their own daughter. Sarah placed a stack of documents on my desk, pulling me back to the present. "These need your signature before tomorrow's closing," she said. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's not too late to send another representative." I picked up my pen, thinking of all the dismissive comments, the years of being ignored, the way they'd thrown me away to focus on Diana. "No," I said firmly. "I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize what they've been dealing with all along." I began signing the papers, each signature bringing me closer to tomorrow's revelation. The daughter they'd dismissed as a failure would be revealed as the owner of not just their dream house, but an entire real estate empire. The child they pushed aside would be exposed as the successful business owner they'd been trying to impress. "Should I clear your schedule for the rest of tomorrow?" Sarah asked, a knowing look in her eye. "In case there's fallout?" I nodded, tucking the signed papers back into their folder. "Clear the whole day. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." As Sarah left my office, I turned back to the window. The sun had set completely now, leaving the city awash in artificial light, somewhere out in Lake Forest. My parents and Diana were probably planning their move into their perfect new home, never suspecting that tomorrow's closing would change everything they thought they knew about their forgotten daughter. I pulled out my phone and opened Diana's Instagram post again, studying the proud faces of my parents posed in front of my house. They looked so confident, so certain of their position in the world. In less than 24 hours, that confidence would shatter. Let them enjoy their last night of believing they'd won. Tomorrow they'd learn what their responsible daughter had really been doing all these years. Tomorrow, they'd discover that the child they'd cast aside had become more successful than they could imagine. Tomorrow, they'd finally understand what they'd thrown away 10 years ago. The morning of the closing dawned clear and bright. I arrived at my office 2 hours early, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan while Sarah arranged the conference room exactly as I had specified. Every detail had to be perfect. Your parents' car just pulled into the parking garage, Sarah announced at 9:45. They're with Diana and their lawyer, Richard Thompson. I smiled slightly. Richard Thompson had been my parents' lawyer for 20 years, handling everything from their investments to their social embarrassments. He'd been the one to formalize my removal from their lives a decade ago. Put them in the small waiting room, I instructed. Let them sit there for exactly 15 minutes before bringing them up. It was petty, perhaps, but I wanted them to stew a bit. Let them experience what it felt like to be kept waiting, to feel less important than they thought they were. Through the security cameras, I watched them fidget in the waiting room. My father, James Mitchell, looked distinguished as ever in his tailored suit, though his hair had gone completely gray. My mother, Patricia, was dressed for what she clearly thought would be a society photo opportunity, complete with pearls and an elaborate updo. Diana lounged on the expensive sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking bored with the whole process. At exactly 10 o'clock a.m., Sarah led them into the main elevator, using her special key to access the penthouse floor. I stood in my office, counting the seconds until the inevitable moment. The elevator doors opened, and I heard my mother's appreciative gasp at the stunning view of Chicago's skyline. Sarah led them down the hallway toward the conference room, their footsteps muffled by plush carpeting. The owner will be joining us shortly, Sarah informed them, her voice professional and calm. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched them settle into the conference room. My father immediately took the power position at the head of the table, while my mother fussed with her hair in the reflection of the windows. Diana slumped into a chair, already looking at her phone again. At 10:05 exactly, I opened my office door and walked into the conference room. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for. My father's face went from polite expectation to shock to a sickly pale color in the span of seconds. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her carefully maintained social mask cracking. Diana actually dropped her phone, her mouth hanging open in a most unladylike way. Good morning, I said calmly, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table from my father. I believe we're here to discuss the sale of 1847 Lakeshore Drive. Richard Thompson recovered first, his legal training kicking in. Sophia, you work here? I smiled, letting the moment stretch out painfully. Actually, I own here. Mitchell Real Estate Holdings is my company. Has been for the past 8 years. My father found his voice, though it shook slightly. That's impossible. This company owns half of Chicago's premium real estate. You couldn't. Couldn't what, Dad? I asked softly. Couldn't build a successful business? Couldn't become more wealthy and powerful than you ever were? Couldn't own the house you've been desperate to buy? My mother's face had gone from shocked to calculating. Darling, she started, her voice honey-sweet. Why didn't you tell us? We're family, we should. Family? I cut her off. You mean the family that took away my trust fund? The family that kicked me out and told me to never come back unless I supported their decisions? That family? Diana finally spoke up, her voice shrill. This isn't fair. You're just trying to ruin Mom and Dad's dream because you're jealous. I pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the table. No, Diana, I'm conducting business. You see, this house you're so excited about. I bought it 3 years ago, specifically because I knew it was exactly what they wanted. I kept it empty, maintained, perfect, waiting for this moment. My father's face had turned from pale to red. You manipulated us. Set us up for some kind of revenge plot. Revenge? I laughed softly. No, Dad. This is business. You taught me that family and business don't mix, remember? When you took my inheritance to fund Diana's failed ventures, well, I'm simply following your example. I opened the folder and began laying out documents. The asking price for the house is $8.5 million. You've already put down a non-refundable deposit of $850,000. However, there are some additional terms we need to discuss. Additional terms? Richard Thompson leaned forward, lawyer mode fully engaged. The terms were already negotiated. I smiled. The preliminary terms, yes. But as the owner, I reserve the right to add conditions before final sale. Unless, of course, you prefer to forfeit the deposit. My father's hands clenched into fists. What do you want, Sophia? First, I said, pulling out a document, I want you to sign this acknowledgement that the trust fund you took from me, which was explicitly left to me by grandfather, was illegally redistributed. You have two choices. Sign this and return the original amount plus 10 years of interest, or walk away from the house and lose your deposit. My mother gasped. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And that's just the first condition. I pulled out another document. This one requires you to acknowledge, in writing, that you wrongfully pushed me out of the family. It will be notarized and kept on file. Diana jumped up, her face red with anger. This is blackmail. No, I corrected calmly. This is consequences. Something this family has always shielded you from, Diana. Speaking of which, I pulled out a third document. This one is actually for you, sister dear. It's a complete accounting of every dollar Mom and Dad have given you over the past 10 years. Money that should have been mine. You can either sign a repayment agreement or you can explain to them why they're losing their dream house and their deposit. The room fell into stunned silence. My father stared at the documents, his face a mix of fury and defeat. My mother had tears running down her face, though I doubted their sincerity. Diana had collapsed back into her chair, looking lost. You have 1 hour to decide, I said, standing up. Sarah will bring you coffee and water. I'll be in my office when you've made your decision. I walked out, leaving them with the weight of their choices. Through the glass walls, I watched them argue, plead, and finally fall into resigned discussion with Richard Thompson. Exactly 58 minutes later, Sarah appeared in my office. They're ready to sign. I returned to the conference room. The atmosphere had changed. The arrogance and superiority were gone, replaced by a heavy silence. My father signed first, his hand shaking slightly as he acknowledged his theft of my trust fund. My mother went next, mascara streaked down her face as she signed the family acknowledgement. Diana was last, nearly tearing the paper as she signed the repayment agreement. Excellent, I said, gathering the signed documents. Now about the house. Just get it over with, my father growled. Name your final price. I smiled, pulling out one last document. Actually, I'm giving you the house. Free and clear, no additional payment needed. Your deposit will be returned as well. They stared at me in confusion. You see, I continued, I didn't do this for revenge. I did this so you would finally understand what you threw away 10 years ago. That house, it's worth $8.5 million. My company, it's worth over $2 billion. I'm not the failure you thought I was, and I never needed your money or your approval. I stood up, straightening my jacket. The house is yours, but our relationship isn't. I don't want your calls, your sudden desire to reconnect, or your attempts to explain. Consider this our final interaction as family. Sophia, my mother started, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The deed will be transferred to your name by the end of business today. Sarah will show you out. Goodbye. I walked out of the conference room for the last time, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I heard Diana burst into tears, my mother's attempts at soothing her, my father's heavy sigh. Sarah appeared at my office door an hour later, after they'd gone. They're gone. Your father tried to leave his business card, but I returned it to him. I nodded, looking out at the city spread below. Have their access to the building revoked. If they try to contact me, redirect them to our legal department. And the house? Sarah asked. Make sure it's transferred as promised. I keep my word, even if they never kept theirs. I turned to face her, but first, call the contractors. I'm ready to start work on that new development project in the Gold Coast. The luxury condos. The ones your father tried to bid on last month? I smiled. The very same. Let's show Chicago what Mitchell Real Estate Holdings can really do. In the years that followed, my company continued to grow. I saw my family occasionally in social media posts or society pages, always in front of that house, always trying to maintain their image of success. Diana went through 3 more failed businesses before finally settling into a role as a lifestyle influencer. whatever that meant. They tried to contact me, of course. My mother sent birthday cards to my office. Sarah returned them unopened. My father attempted to schedule business meetings. His calls never made it past the front desk. Diana even tried to ambush me at charity events. My security team was very efficient at preventing such encounters. But I had meant what I said. Our relationship as family was over. I had given them the house they always wanted, but I had kept something far more valuable: my freedom from their expectations, their judgment, and their conditional love. The view from my office still faces west toward Lake Forest, where they live in that perfect house. Sometimes when the sun sets, I can almost see its lights twinkling in the distance, but I don't feel regret or longing anymore. Instead, I feel gratitude. Gratitude to my grandfather for believing in me, gratitude to my parents for pushing me away, and most of all, gratitude to myself for becoming someone they never thought I could be. The responsible one, it turns out, did just fine on her own. Sarah sticks her head into my office, interrupting my thoughts. Your next appointment is here. The developers for the new downtown project. I turn away from the window, away from the past, and face my future. Send them in. We have work to do. After all, I have an empire to run, and it has nothing to do with the family who never believed I could build it.